Alright, response video to Piero. Who, well, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much to say. Yeah, so, whatever. Yeah, it's my obligation to go find the curtain and then pull it back and show you the wizard. Fine, whatever. I have to get the witch's broomstick too. You know, yeah, right. It's my job to debunk. This is like, you know, just like the challenge of many of the voodoo artists. Yeah, you know, you can only watch me do my little tricks, you know, under my rules. So yeah, this is just whatever psychic phenomenon here. It's really, this should be just basically part of this debunking should have already been taken place. Nobody should have already done all this math. Alright, to ask you another question. This frequency component that this wave is made out of, alright, these little ripply waves that are intersecting, what frequency are they intersecting at? What is the frequency of those little waves that the photon is creating? Is it the frequency of the photon? So the single photon has a frequency, and let's say if it does, and it creates these waves, aren't they going to be like, I don't know, really high frequency, like gigahertz and such, megahertzes? So there's going to be a ton of those little lines. There's going to be a ton of little intersections before they reach this target, unless the target is about, I don't know, no distance at all from the slits. Any distance at all, there should be a zillion little straight lines, a whole bunch of them, not just 6 or 7. That doesn't make any sense. That works for a very slow wave. That works for a wavelength of you know, centimeters, what, millimeters? That's a huge wavelength. Light has a teeny weeny itsy bitsy wavelength. So explain where this wavelength comes from. What's it a manifestation of? And let's figure out what it is. That's why I want to know the dimensions. I can't calculate the wavelength if I don't know the distances. If it's creating 5 bars and there's a focal distance, exactly, then we can calculate exactly what the wavelength is of these interfering waves. And I don't think it's going to turn out to be anything close to the wavelength one would expect from a photon. But whatever. So, yeah, there's way too much wrong with obligating me. I'm not the one making the extraordinary claims that one photon travels through 2 slits. I'm not doing that. You're doing that. You should be the one providing the extraordinary evidence. This is just a turn the world upside down kind of bullshit, where now it's the skeptic's job to sit there and disprove the bold statements of others. It's not my job. It's your job to prove it, demonstrate it, not just talk it. The wave interference pattern, as I've stated before, is crudely simple in its basic dynamic. All it is an odd and even pattern. Double on the odd, halved on the even, to 0. So what's so complicated? You know what? That pattern can't be created by lots of other manifestations. And this whole idea of comparing sound to light, yeah, they both have a limiting factor. They both are phenomenon of limitation, you know, where you can't go faster. And one of them's because of the medium, in the case of sound, and in the case of light, well, we're not sure. But regardless, it does seem like there's not much point in comparing the two. It's like comparing galaxies to atoms. It might not be a great idea to sit there and expect the same kind of behavior or to apply the same kind of rules. So what sound does and what light does, they might have some things in common because they have some things in common. But no reason to start confining either one to what you know about the other and establishing it as some sort of fact. Because I don't think it's been established as a fact. Alright, on this refraction, diffraction, okay, fine, whatever, the terminology, I'm going back to fucking high school physics, you know, and I remember the word refraction all over the friggin' place, so yeah, whatever. Whatever you want to call the influences that may attract or repulse, that may cause something to be reflected or deflected or even absorbed. Well, deflection, they use that word for what they do to electrons in a cathode ray tube, so we can call it deflection. But regardless, the point is that depending on the dynamics, the math of these slits, you're going to have certain possibilities. And they're important, because maybe we can trace every one of the possible paths for one of these photons and come up with an answer. And then your statement that there's no such thing as a straight shooting gun, I think is really quite bogus. We can establish an experiment, we can have a bullet hit a bullet, we can do it. Alright, if you don't fire the gun too quickly, it's not going to have any recoil problem. You establish a definite focus, and you'll hit one bullet into a target, and you can drive the next bullet right up its ass. So it can be done. And it can be done with photons. All you have to do is create the right filter, like a narrow tube or some other thing that would absorb any deflecting or deviant photons. And so if we have a 10-foot tube and the photons have to travel through that without hitting the sides, or they'll be absorbed, yeah, then whatever photons get through are going to come out pretty friggin' straight, and on a pretty definite path. But like you said, that's not how the two-slit experiment works. It's not about shooting straight, it's about shooting crooked. It's about having photons come at those two slits from slightly different angles. And my argument is the math might take care of that. Because of those angles, they're going to deflect, especially depending on what the arc of that variability is. They're going to hit the sides of those slits and be deflected in different paths. And then I also argue that has been demonstrated by other people. You know, you put a needle in front of a laser beam, and you'll create all kinds of wave pattern, you know, merely because the light's getting deflected around the needle in the middle. You don't even need the slits to create that deflection. And yes, that's a beam of light, so there's a lot of interference and noise, but the fact is you get a pretty clear pattern. And so that pattern's coming from someplace. It's part of what light does when it passes by objects, what photons do when they are interfere with something. I mean, even the guy in the little short video, he squirts smoke on the laser beam to make it visible. Why does that make it visible? Oh, that's right, because it throws a bunch of dirt into the air, and the little photons start crashing into the dirt and reflecting to your eye. Yeah. So yeah, there's all kinds of, you know, photons are bouncing off little flecks of smoke. So come on, there's a lot to be analyzed in the two-slit experiment before the conclusion that it's traveling through both slits and interfering with itself can be drawn. That is not the first place you go, and I'm still going to argue that if you modify the experiment just slightly, you can rule that possibility out or rule that possibility in. Like I said, if I just see this two-slit experiment where they just mechanically open and close one of the slits without changing anything else in the experiment, well, then we'll have something. You know, because then we'll have that magic photon that lands in one spot with the slit open, and it lands in a different spot with it closed. And we can only assume it went through, say, slit R, the right slit, and there's no other way it could get to its location. And if we, close that slit and still there, or vice versa, well, then we have some evidence. But what we have now is just a lot of talk, and I'm sorry that you think I'm asking for way too much to have evidence of your going through two slits at once bullshit theory. But yeah, you need to back that up with something. It is a bold goddamn statement, and you're just prancing around saying, well, that's what everybody's saying. Me, the wizard, the green people, the horse of a different color, even the Tin Man's going for it. So fuck you. We're not letting you anywhere near that curtain. Well, screw you. I mean, yes, screw that kind of conversation. So I think we're about done until I see some evidence, not just a bunch of speculation and bullshit based on your interpretation. Yeah, I had to fix the little robot, and he appears to work. The bottom is quite clean. Yeah, there's cement down there. The paint's not great, but the pool is clean. Yay! So it worked. Yay for me.